Hi everyone, welcome to Nithrania Game Club. My name is Branislav Berec and you're watching Game in a Nutshell, a series of videos designed to teach how to play various board games. Today we will learn how to play the game of Periodic. First, place the game board to the center of the table. Then separate these goal cards by color and randomly choose 6 green, 6 blue, 5 purple and 5 pink cards. Place these decks above the game board and flip the top card of each deck face up. Then place these award tiles next to the deck with the corresponding color. Now look at the green goal card and place these two markers on the corresponding elements on the game board. So the first marker has to go to the sodium and the second one to the chlorine. Do the same for the blue goal card, so one marker will go to the gallium, second marker goes to arsenic, and the third marker goes to indium. Repeat the process for the purple and the pink cards as well. Then place one energy token to each of these 5 periodic trend spots. Randomly determine the starting player, and then the first, second, and the third player in the player order would place their player markers on this first spot of the academic track. If there would be a fourth or a fifth player in the game, they would both place their markers on the second spot of the academic track. Now distribute the energy tokens to each player. First player would get 3 tokens, second player would get 4 tokens, and the third player will get 5 tokens. Then the fourth player will again only get 3 tokens, and the fifth player would get 4 tokens. Then each player will get 1 flask, 1 microscope, 1 disc, and 6 research cubes. Now shuffle these element group cards and randomly create the circle of these cards next to the game board. If you wish so, you can also create 2 half circles on both sides of the game board. Then the first player in the player order places his microscope token onto the element group card, which is, so to say, in the bottom left corner of this circle, which is a weird expression anyway. Then the next player in the player order would skip 1 card in the clockwise direction and place his microscope token to the next card. The third player in the player order would again skip 1 card and place his microscope token to the next card. And if there was a fourth and a fifth player in the game, they would both place their microscope tokens on the 7th card. Now all players are going to place their flasks on the game board. Each player will place his flask on the element with the lowest atomic number in the element group where he has his microscope token. Atomic number is this number in the top left corner of each element. So the orange player would place his flask onto the boron element, pink player would place his flask on the aluminium element, and the green player to the very first element in the periodic table. And finally, each player will get 3 agenda cards. In a 5-player game, only 2 agenda cards. They would secretly choose 1 card and put the remaining cards back into the box. Agenda cards are hidden and they are only scored at the end of the game. In the game of periodics, players are trying to complete these goal cards by researching all the elements required by those cards. They do it by moving their flask across the periodic table, using their energy tokens and activating these periodic trends. Anytime the players end up their move on the element which is required by any of the goal cards, they can research that element and place the research cube on the goal card. When one player would research all the elements required by the goal card, he would score that card, and any other player with his own research cubes on the same card would also score some victory points. The goal card goes to the player who successfully completed it, and then the new goal is drawn. When players end their movement on the element group, determined by this element circle, they can advance their microscope, and they also advance their player marker on the academic track. At the end of the game, players also score victory points based on the position of their player marker on the academic track. Whoever has the most points at the end of the game is the winner. The game of periodics is played in turns. Starting with the first player and continuing in a clockwise direction, each player takes one turn. On their turn, players use the energy tokens to activate these trends. By activating the trend, players move their flask across the periodic table. Anytime they end their movement on the element with some of the goal marker, they can research that element and place the research cube to the corresponding spot on the appropriate goal card. At the end of the turn, if any of the goal card is completed, that card is scored and a new one is flipped face up. Finally, if the player fulfills the requirements, he could also advance on the academic track. To activate the periodic trends and move the flask across the periodic table, players can do two things. They can either spend their energy tokens or they can gain energy tokens. When they decide to spend energy tokens, for the first activation they need to pay one token and they can choose any trend. So let's say the player would choose this one and now he can move his flask across the periodic table. We will talk about these periodic trends in a minute. Now for the second and third and all other activations this turn, players need to spend 2 energy tokens. Again, they can choose any trend they want. After spending the tokens, they can then move the flask. The players can activate as many trends as they want during their turn, as long as they have energy tokens to pay for those moves. When players decide to gain tokens, they choose any trend they want, they take all the energy tokens from that trend, and they can only activate that trend one time, which means they can only move their flask once this turn. However, for the next turn, this purple player or pink player will have one activation, second, third and fourth activation. So he would be able to move his flask 4 times. Now let's take a look at how these periodic trends work. When you activate any of these trends, you can move your flask 1 to 5 spaces in a given direction. When you activate this trend, you increase or decrease the atomic number of the element you are on. As already explained, the atomic number is this number in the top left corner of each element. So if this orange player, starting on the number 5, which is boron, would activate this trend, he can move 1 to 5 spaces by increasing or decreasing the atomic number. So from boron with the atomic number 5, he could move to the element with the atomic number 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10, or going back, so from number 5, going to the element with the atomic number 4, 3, 2, 1, and there's no atomic number 0. So he could move to oxygen, let's say. When you activate this trend, you can actually move only up or to the right. So let's say the orange flask is located over here. So from here, using this trend, he could move 5 spaces like this, or he could move 1 space up and then going left as if there was no gap here. So going from this element to this one is considered just one move. And then he can continue left or up. Using these trends, you can never move diagonally. Similarly, using this trend, player can move the flask only downwards or to the left. So using this trend, player could go like 1, 2, 3 moves. The fourth and the fifth periodic trend works in the same manner, so when using this one, players can only move down or to the right. Now remember, when using these trends, there's no gap between these two elements, so moving from hydrogen to helium is one move. Similarly, from moving this element to this element is also one move. And the same applies for these groups of elements. It's like they were not even here. So moving from barium to hafnium is also just one move. So the green player, using this periodic trend, could go 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Anytime players end their move on any element with these goal markers, they can research that element. So let's say the green player would spend 1 energy token and activate this trend, and he would move 4 spaces down. he can now take one of his research cubes and place it on this spot on the purple card, because he successfully researched calcium. Now for the 2 energy tokens, he can activate this trend and move 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. And now he can place another cube on the carbon on the same purple goal card. So the players can research one element per one move. If there are multiple goal markers on one element, because the element is required by 2 goal cards, when player ends his move on such element, he must choose which goal he is going to activate. The green player can now choose either the carbon on the purple card or carbon on the blue card. Let's say he would choose the purple card. Now, when players activate the periodic trends, they have to move 1 to 5 spaces. They have to move at least 1. So when they start the move on the element with the goal marker, they cannot research that element. They have to move out and then they have to return back to research the element. More players can research the same element, even on the same goal card. However, one player can research each element on each goal card only one time. So if the orange player would come back, he would not be able to research the carbon again on the same card. But in this case, he could research the carbon on a blue card. At the end of the player's turn, if that player completed any of the goal cards, that card will be scored. Any other player who would also have some research cubes on such card would also get some points. If the other player has 1 research cube on a completed goal card, he would score 3 victory points and he would get this lab token. If instead he would have 2 research cubes on the completed goal card, he would be awarded a lab token worth of 5 victory points. Now, the player who successfully completed the goal card would also take one of these award tiles if available. All the research cubes are returned back to the players. The goal card is given to the player who completed that goal, together with the award tile if available, and then the new card is flipped face up. Then take the corresponding goal markers and place them on these new elements depicted on the new goal card. When players would end their turn on any element which is part of the element group shown on the next element card in this circle, so for example if the green player would end his turn on any of these halogen elements, he would advance the microscope to the next card and also advance their player marker on the academic track. As indicated by these small dots, at any time during the game, this spot can only contain maximum 1 player marker. This spot can contain maximum 2 player markers, and this can contain maximum 3 player markers. So in this example, this player cannot advance to this spot anymore. Similarly, in this example, this spot already contains 3 markers, so this player cannot advance to this spot. Only after one of these players would advance to the next spot, one other player marker could be moved into this position. The end of the game would be triggered in 2 situations. First one, if one of the goal card decks would be completely depleted. Second, if 2 players advanced to the rightmost position on this academic track, which means there is 1 player marker in the rightmost position and 1 player marker in the second rightmost position. If end of the game is triggered by depleting one of the decks, add 1 random card of the same color from the box. At any time during the game, there must be at least 1 goal card of each color. After the player triggered the endgame condition, all other players have 1 more turn. So the player who triggered the endgame condition will not have any more turns. First, calculate the points from all the goal cards and the lab tokens, but before that, all players who still have some research cubes on unfinished goal cards will be awarded the lab tokens. Again, if a player has 1 cube, 1 research cube on a goal card, he would be awarded the lab token worth of 3 victory points. For 2 research cubes on unfinished goal card, player would be awarded 5 victory points in a lab token. So sum up the points on the completed goal cards, add the points from the lab tokens, add the victory points from the academic track based on the current position of player markers, and finally add the victory points from the agenda card. The player with the highest total score is the winner. Finally, let's take a quick look at all the effects of these award tiles. If you have a green award, you can use any time during your move to move additional 1, 2 or 3 spaces. So let's say the purple player wants to move from this element to this element. He can activate the periodic trend and now he can move 5 spaces. However, he needs 3 more, so he can take the award tile, put it back into the box and move those additional 3 spaces. The blue award tile allows players to take 2 energy tokens from 1 or 2 trend spots. That means that the player can take 2 energy tokens from any 2 periodic trends without activating those trends. He has to do it before he decides whether he would spend or gain the energy tokens. Purple award tiles allow the players to take 1 free move. Each tile is different. This one corresponds to this periodic trend. This one allows the player to choose either this trend or this trend. And this one allows the player to choose between this trend or this periodic trend. And finally, the pink award tiles allow players to move their flask immediately to any of these elements depicted on the other side of the award tile. So for example, when using this one, a player can move his flask to any of the blue elements without spending any energy tokens. And that's how you play the game of periodics. If you have any questions or comments, please put them into the comment section below. I'll be happy to answer those questions. If you like this series, please subscribe. My name is Branislav Berec. You've been watching Game in a Nutshell, and see you next time.